The morning sun streamed through the windows of LaGuardia Airport as Mike Tyson walked through the terminal. People turned their heads, some openly staring, others pretending not to notice the boxing legend in their midst. Mike was used to it. After decades in the spotlight, the whispers and second glances had become as familiar to him as the weight of boxing gloves once were. Mike checked his watch as he approached the first-class check-in counter. He was early, just as his assistant had planned. The charity event in Los Angeles wasn't until tomorrow evening, but Mike preferred having time to settle in before speaking engagements. Public speaking still made him nervous even after all these years. "Good morning, Mr. Tyson," the airline attendant said with a bright smile. Her name tag read Patricia. "We're honored to have you flying with us today," Mike nodded politely. "Thank you. Appreciate it," Patricia typed quickly on her computer. "I see you're in first class, seat 2A. That's one of our best seats, window with extra legroom." She handed him his boarding pass. "We'll begin boarding in about 45 minutes. Would you like access to our VIP lounge while you wait?" Mike accepted the offer with a small smile. In the lounge, he found a quiet corner away from curious eyes. He pulled out a folder containing notes for his speech at the charity event. The organization helped kids from rough neighborhoods find purpose through sports, something that hit close to home for Mike. He wanted his words to matter, to really reach these kids. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. "Flight on time. Car will meet you at LAX. Call me when you land." Mike texted back a quick "okay" and returned to his notes, making small marks in the margins. The speech was about second chances and redemption. Mike knew those topics better than most. When boarding began, Mike was among the first passengers called. He walked down the jet bridge, his carry-on bag in hand. The flight attendants at the door straightened up when they saw him approach. "Mr. Tyson, welcome aboard," said a flight attendant with a warm smile. Her name tag read Diane. "I'm a huge fan. It's an honor to have you on our flight today." Mike thanked her with the gentle politeness that had replaced his once fierce demeanor. Age and experience had softened his edges, though the power in his frame still commanded respect. "Let me show you to your seat," Diane offered, leading him down the aisle of the nearly empty first-class cabin. "Here you are, 2A. Can I get you anything before we complete boarding? Perhaps some water or orange juice?" "Water would be fine, thank you," Mike replied, settling into the spacious window seat. The leather was soft, and the view of the tarmac reminded him of countless flights to matches around the world. Different times, different purposes, but the same pre-flight butterflies. Diane brought his water promptly, and Mike took out his speech again. He wanted to review it one more time before takeoff. The words blurred slightly on the page. He'd need to remember his reading glasses next time. Other first-class passengers began to board, most giving Mike a respectful nod as they passed. A few did double takes, and one young businessman couldn't hide his excitement, though he refrained from approaching. Mike appreciated the space. Fame had taught him to value the rare moments of normalcy. The plane gradually filled. Through the gap in the curtain separating first class from the rest of the aircraft, Mike could see the steady stream of passengers filing in. He turned back to his window, watching the ground crew load luggage and prepare for departure. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts and overhead bins. The familiar routine of air travel continued around Mike as he sipped his water and made a few final notes on his speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 732 to Los Angeles." The captain's voice came over the intercom. "We're just waiting for the last few passengers and then we'll be on our way. Flight time today will be approximately 6 hours. Weather in Los Angeles is sunny and 75 degrees. Mike put away his speech and leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. He'd been up since dawn, and the gentle hum of the aircraft was soothing. Maybe he'd catch a nap after takeoff. A commotion at the front of the plane caught his attention. A man in an expensive suit had boarded late and was speaking in hushed but insistent tones with Diane. Mike couldn't hear their conversation, but the man's body language was tense, his hand gestures sharp and demanding. Diane nodded repeatedly, her professional smile looking increasingly strained. She glanced toward Mike, then quickly looked away when she caught him watching. Something was wrong. The man in the suit stood at the front of the first-class cabin, his phone pressed to his ear. He was around 50, with graying hair and the confident posture of someone used to being in charge. His tailored suit probably cost more than what many people made in a month. He kept looking in Mike's direction while speaking into his phone. Mike returned to gazing out the window, trying not to read too much into the situation. After years of being in the public eye, he'd learned that not everything was about him. Still, an uneasy feeling settled in his stomach. A few minutes passed before Diane approached his seat again. This time her smile seemed forced. "Mr. Tyson," she said quietly, leaning down so others couldn't hear. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, but we have a situation with our seating arrangements." Mike looked up, meeting her eyes. They were apologetic, even fearful. "What's the problem?" Diane hesitated. "One of our premium customers has specifically requested your seat. He flies with us weekly and has some standing arrangements." Mike glanced toward the man in the suit, who was now watching their conversation with thinly veiled interest. "I have this seat booked," Mike said calmly. "Confirmed weeks ago." "Yes, sir, I understand," Diane nodded rapidly. "And under normal circumstances we would never ask, but Mr. Richards is a platinum member and—" Her voice trailed off. Mike understood what wasn't being said. He'd encountered similar situations throughout his life. Sometimes it was subtle, sometimes blatant, but always unmistakable. "Where would you like me to move to?" he asked, his voice level despite the familiar burn of indignation rising in his chest. Relief flooded Diane's face. "There's a seat in the third row, still first class, of course." 3C, "It's an aisle seat, not a window, I'm afraid." Mike began gathering his things. A lifetime of being in the public eye had taught him when to fight and when to step back. This wasn't the boxing ring. Making a scene wouldn't solve anything. "I'm so sorry about this, Mr. Tyson." "Truly," Diane added, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's fine," Mike replied, though they both knew it wasn't. "But I'd like the name of your supervisor, please." "And the flight number." Diane blinked rapidly, then nodded. "Of course. I'll write that down for you right away." As Mike moved to his new seat, he felt the eyes of other passengers on him. Some looked confused, others uncomfortable. The man in the suit, Mr. Richards, was already settling into seat 2A, spreading out his belongings with entitled ease. Mike sat down in 3C. The seat was still comfortable, but it wasn't what he had paid for. It wasn't what he had confirmed. It wasn't what he deserved. He took out his phone and sent a quick text to his attorney. No drama, no threats, just facts. Time, flight number, what happened. That's all it took when you had the truth on your side. The flight attendants went through their safety demonstration. Diane avoided eye contact with Mike. The plane taxied toward the runway, engines rumbling with increasing power. As they took off, climbing into the clear blue sky, Mike looked out at the shrinking city below. He thought about his speech tomorrow, about second chances, about overcoming obstacles, about standing up with dignity. The words seemed to carry new weight now. He didn't know it yet. But his quiet response to this moment of disrespect would set in motion events that would change policies and careers, and perhaps most importantly, remind people that true power comes not from making others feel small, but from maintaining your dignity when others try to diminish you. For now, though Mike simply closed his eyes as the plane leveled off at cruising altitude, he had a speech to prepare for, and a message about respect that suddenly felt more urgent than ever. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and the cabin filled with the subtle clicks of metal clasps being released. Mike kept his fastened. Old habits from years of air travel had taught him that turbulence could come without warning, much like life itself. From his new seat in 3C, Mike could see Mr. Richards settling comfortably into what should have been his window seat. The man spread out his laptop, phone, and various papers across the tray table with the confidence of someone who always got his way. Occasionally, Richards would glance back at Mike with a look that wasn't quite smug but wasn't apologetic either. Mike took a deep breath and pulled out his speech notes again. The charity event was important, more important than some airline seating drama. Kids were counting on him to deliver words that might actually make a difference in their lives. Still, the knot of frustration in his stomach made it hard to focus on the words in front of him. Diane, the flight attendant who had asked him to move, was now avoiding his section of the cabin entirely. Instead, another attendant named Tom was serving his area. "Can I get you anything to drink, Mr. Tyson?" Tom asked, his voice carrying a note of extra respect, as if trying to make up for what had happened. "Just water, please," Mike replied. "And that information I asked for." Tom nodded quickly. "I'll bring that right away, sir." While waiting, Mike pulled out his phone again. No signal at this altitude, of course, but he could still type out an email to his lawyer that would send once they landed. He described the situation in careful detail, noting the time, the flight number, and the names of the staff involved. Mike had learned over the years that documentation was everything. Memory faded, but written words remained. Tom returned with a bottle of water and a small note card. "Here you go, Mr. Tyson. The supervisor's name is Robert Walsh. His contact information and the flight details are all there." Mike accepted the card with a nod of thanks. He slipped it into his pocket without comment. An hour into the flight, the tension in the first-class cabin was palpable. Other passengers had witnessed what happened during boarding, and several kept glancing between Mike and Richards. A few looked embarrassed, others uncomfortable. One elderly woman across the aisle caught Mike's eye and gave him a small, sympathetic smile. Richards seemed oblivious to, or perhaps simply unconcerned with, the atmosphere he had created. He ordered a scotch, complained loudly that it wasn't the brand he preferred, and sent it back. The flight attendant scrambled to please him, bringing a different bottle with profuse apologies. Mike watched this display quietly. It reminded him of so many moments throughout his life. Moments where he'd seen certain people treated one way and others treated differently. The rules always seemed to bend for some but remain rigid for others. "Excuse me," a voice said beside him. Mike turned to find a young man, perhaps in his early 30s, leaning slightly into the aisle from the row behind. "I just wanted to say I'm a huge fan. Your comeback story has been an inspiration to me." Mike offered a small smile. "Thank you. I appreciate that." The young man hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "What happened earlier wasn't right. I travel a lot for work, and I've never seen them make someone move like that when they had a confirmed seat." Mike nodded but didn't comment further. He'd learned that sometimes silence said more than words ever could. The man seemed to understand. He gave Mike a respectful nod and sat back in his seat. Halfway through the flight, Mike decided to stretch his legs. He walked toward the lavatory at the front of the first-class cabin, which meant passing by Richards. As he approached, Richards suddenly stuck his leg out into the aisle, forcing Mike to step around it. It wasn't quite a trip attempt, just subtle enough to be dismissed as carelessness if called out. Mike paused, looking down at the outstretched leg, then up at Richards' face. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment the cabin seemed to hold its breath. "Excuse me," Mike said calmly. Richards held his gaze for a beat longer than was comfortable, then slowly retracted his leg. "Of course," he replied with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. The confrontation was minor, almost nothing really, but the underlying current was unmistakable. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about respect, about the unspoken rules that determined who had to move and who got to stay put. When Mike returned to his seat, he found Tom waiting with an apologetic expression. "Mr. Tyson, the captain would like to speak with you if you have a moment," Tom said quietly. Mike raised an eyebrow but nodded. Tom led him to the galley area where a man in a pilot's uniform was waiting. "Mr. Tyson, I'm Captain Wilson," the man said, extending his hand. "I've just been informed about the seating situation that occurred before takeoff. I wanted to personally apologize." Mike shook the captain's hand. "I appreciate that, but it seems like your airline has some policies I should know about." Captain Wilson's face tightened slightly. "What happened wasn't policy, sir. I can assure you of that. It appears there was a misunderstanding among the crew." "A misunderstanding," Mike repeated, the words flat. The captain shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Richards is a frequent flyer who often makes specific requests. Sometimes the crew tries to accommodate those requests, but what happened today crossed a line. It shouldn't have happened, and I'm very sorry it did." Mike studied the captain's face. The man seemed genuinely disturbed by what had occurred. But there was something else there, too. A hint of resignation, as if this wasn't entirely unexpected. "Does Mr. Richards often ask to have passengers moved?" Mike asked. The captain hesitated before answering. "I'm not at liberty to discuss other passengers, Mr. Tyson. But I can tell you that this situation will be addressed when we land." Mike nodded. "It will be," he agreed, though perhaps not in the way the captain imagined. When Mike returned to his seat, he found that someone had placed a first-class amenity kit on his tray table, a peace offering of sorts. He set it aside unopened. For the next 2 hours, Mike alternated between reviewing his speech and simply gazing out at the clouds through the small window across the aisle. His thoughts kept drifting to his own journey, how far he'd come from the angry young man who would have responded very differently to today's slight. The old Mike might have caused a scene. The old Mike might have made headlines for all the wrong reasons. But that wasn't who he was anymore. Years of personal growth had taught him that true power wasn't about intimidation or force. It was about dignity and the strategic use of influence. As the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, Diane finally approached Mike's seat again. "Mr. Tyson," she said, her voice barely audible over the engine noise, "I just wanted to say again how sorry I am about what happened earlier." Mike looked up at her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, suggesting she'd been crying in the galley. "It wasn't my decision," she continued. "Mr. Richards threatened to report me if I didn't accommodate his request. He said he knew people at corporate headquarters. I was afraid for my job." She swallowed hard. "But that's no excuse. I should have stood my ground." Mike considered her words carefully before responding. "We all have choices to make," he said finally. "Even when they're difficult." Diane nodded, her eyes downcast. "Yes, sir. I understand." As she turned to go, Mike added, "I'll be making a call when we land." Fear flashed across her face. "I understand, sir," she repeated, her voice unsteady. The landing was smooth, the Los Angeles sunshine streaming through the windows as the plane taxied to the gate. The captain's voice came over the intercom, thanking everyone for flying with them and hoping to see them again soon. The standard script seemed oddly inappropriate given what had transpired. As the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers began to gather their belongings, Mr. Richards stood up and straightened his expensive suit. He caught Mike's eye one last time, offering a curt nod that contained neither apology nor regret. Mike remained seated, letting others file out ahead of him. He pulled out his phone, checking that the email to his attorney was ready to send. All it needed was a final tap to deliver the message that would set everything in motion. As the cabin emptied, Mike finally stood and collected his carry-on bag. Tom and Diane stood near the exit, bidding passengers goodbye. Both looked nervous as Mike approached. "Have a good day, Mr. Tyson," Tom said, his professional smile strained. Mike paused at the door. "It's not about the seat," he told them quietly. "It's about who gets to decide who sits where and why." With that, he stepped off the plane into the bright California afternoon, tapping send on his email as he walked up the jet bridge. Behind him, neither Tom nor Diane fully understood yet how much was about to change because of what had happened on Flight 732. Not just for them, but for an entire airline. Mike's car was waiting at arrivals just as his assistant had promised. As he settled into the back seat, the driver asked how his flight was. "Enlightening," Mike replied, gazing out at the palm trees lining the boulevard. "Very enlightening." The hotel suite was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Los Angeles. Mike set his bag down and walked straight to the window, taking in the sprawling city below. The flight's event still weighed on his mind, but the charity event tomorrow was his priority. Those kids deserved his full attention. His phone rang. The screen displayed Frank Stevens, his attorney of 15 years and one of the few people Mike trusted completely. "Frank," Mike answered. "Thanks for getting back to me so quickly." "Mike, I got your email." "That's completely unacceptable," Frank said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They can't treat you or anyone that way. Do you want me to go after them? We could make a public statement, maybe pursue legal action." Mike moved away from the window and sat on the edge of the king-sized bed. "No public statements. No threats. Not yet. What do you want to do then?" Frank asked. Mike thought for a moment. "I want you to make a call to their corporate headquarters. Just the facts. What happened, when it happened, who was involved. Ask them what they plan to do about it." "Just one call?" Frank sounded surprised. "Sometimes one call is all it takes if it's the right call," Mike replied. "This isn't about me getting special treatment because I'm Mike Tyson. It's about nobody being treated the way I was treated today." There was a pause on the line. "I understand," Frank said finally. "I'll make the call right away and let you know what they say." "Appreciate it," Mike said, ending the call. He unpacked his small suitcase, hanging his suit for tomorrow's event. The speech notes came out next, placed carefully on the desk. Mike ordered room service, a simple grilled chicken salad, then took a long shower. letting the hot water wash away some of the day's tension. As he was drying off, his phone buzzed with a text from Frank. Call made. Contact was Lisa Pearson, VP of Customer Relations. She seemed genuinely shocked. Promised to investigate immediately and get back to us by tomorrow morning. Mike texted back a simple okay and set the phone down. He wasn't holding his breath. He'd heard promises before. After a quiet dinner in his room, Mike spent an hour refining his speech for tomorrow. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, preparing to talk to kids about dignity and respect just hours after being disrespected himself. Maybe there was something to learn from that. Maybe it would make his words more authentic. Around 9 o'clock, Mike's phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello? He answered cautiously. Mr. Tyson? This is Lisa Pearson from Sky Global Airlines. I hope I'm not calling too late. Mike sat up straighter. No, it's fine. I wanted to personally reach out regarding the incident on today's flight, Lisa said, her voice both professional and genuinely concerned. First, let me say how deeply sorry I am. What happened was completely unacceptable and goes against everything our airline stands for. Mike remained silent, waiting. I've reviewed the initial reports and spoken with several staff members, she continued. We're conducting a thorough investigation, but I didn't want to wait until that was complete to contact you. I appreciate that, Mike said, but I'm more interested in what happens next. Lisa took a deep breath. Yes, of course. We're taking this extremely seriously. The flight attendants involved have been placed on administrative leave pending our investigation. We're also reviewing all interactions with the other passenger, Mr. Richards, who has a history of making demands. A history, Mike repeated. Yes, Lisa admitted. I've discovered that there have been several incidents involving Mr. Richards in the past, though none quite like this. It appears that some staff have been accommodating his request to avoid conflicts, which is absolutely not our policy. Mike thought about Diane's tearful apology on the plane. Your staff seemed afraid of him. Afraid for their jobs. That's part of what we're investigating, Lisa said. No employee should ever feel pressured to break our policies out of fear. There appears to be a systemic issue here that goes beyond just today's incident, and we're committed to addressing it. Mike nodded, though she couldn't see him. Good. Mr. Tyson, we would like to offer you compensation for your experience. I don't want compensation, Mike cut in. I want change. There was a moment of silence on the line. I understand, Lisa said finally. May I ask what kind of change you're hoping to see? Mike stood up and walked back to the window, looking out at the city lights. I want training for your staff. Real training about how to handle situations like this. I want clear policies that protect both your employees and your passengers from people who think their money or status puts them above others. And I want accountability for anyone who was part of this, not just the flight attendants who were following orders, but whoever created a culture where this could happen in the first place. Those are all reasonable requests, Lisa said, and align with changes I believe we need to make. Would you be open to a follow-up conversation tomorrow after I've had more time to investigate? Yes, Mike replied. I'll be speaking at a charity event tomorrow evening, but I'm free before that. Thank you, Mr. Tyson. I'll call you tomorrow with updates. And again, I'm truly sorry for what happened. After ending the call, Mike felt slightly better. Lisa had seemed sincere, and the quick response suggested the airline was taking this seriously. Still, he'd seen how these things could go. Big promises followed by minimal action once the risk of bad publicity faded. He texted Frank a brief summary of the call. Frank replied immediately, Sounds promising, but let's see what they actually do. Corporate PR is good at saying the right things. Mike smiled at his attorney's healthy skepticism. Frank had seen too many empty corporate promises to be easily impressed. The next morning, Mike woke early and went for a run around the hotel grounds. Physical activity had always helped clear his mind, and today he needed that clarity. The charity event was only hours away, and despite the airline situation, he wanted to be fully present for it. After showering and ordering breakfast, Mike checked his phone. 3 missed calls from Lisa Pearson, and a text asking him to call back at his convenience. Mike finished his coffee before dialing. This is Mike Tyson, he said when she answered. Mr. Tyson, thank you for calling back, Lisa said. Her voice sounded different today, more determined. I've spent the night reviewing evidence and speaking with staff members. What I've found is deeply troubling. Go on, Mike prompted. It appears that Mr. Richards has been demanding special treatment for years, including requesting seats already assigned to other passengers. He's leveraged his business relationship with the airline. His company books millions in corporate travel with us annually to intimidate staff. Several employees have reported feeling pressured to accommodate him, even when it meant bending or breaking our policies. Mike wasn't surprised. And your management allowed this? Yes, Lisa admitted. There's evidence that certain managers have been turning a blind eye or even encouraging staff to keep Mr. Richards happy. But what happened with you crossed a line that never should have been approached, let alone crossed. So what happens now? Mike asked. The flight attendants who were directly involved will remain on leave while receiving additional training. They were put in an impossible position by their supervisors. Lisa paused. As for those supervisors, the regional manager who established this unofficial policy of preferential treatment for Mr. Richards has been terminated, effective immediately. Mike raised an eyebrow. That was faster action than he'd expected. We're also severing our corporate relationship with Mr. Richards' company and have informed him that his platinum status has been revoked. He will no longer be flying with Sky Global. That's a big decision, Mike noted. His company books millions with you. Some business isn't worth having if it compromises our values, Lisa replied firmly. Additionally, we're implementing mandatory training for all customer-facing staff on equality in service and how to handle pressure from high-status customers. And we're creating a confidential reporting system so employees can safely report when they're being asked to break policy. Mike nodded slowly. The response was comprehensive, more than he'd anticipated. Mr. Tyson, we would still like to offer you compensation for your experience, but I understand that's not your primary concern. Instead, I'd like to invite you to consult on our new training program if you're willing. Your perspective would be invaluable. The request surprised Mike. I'll think about it, he said honestly. Let me get through my charity event today and we can talk more later. Of course. Thank you for your time, Mr. Tyson. I'll send you a formal email detailing everything we've discussed. After hanging up, Mike sat in thoughtful silence. The airline's response had been swift and substantial, far more than the typical corporate damage control. Perhaps his one call really had made a difference. His phone buzzed with a text from Frank. How did the follow-up go? Mike texted back, better than expected. They fired the regional manager and cut ties with Richards and his company. Implementing new training and policies too. Frank's reply came quickly. Impressive. They must be terrified of the PR nightmare if this got out. Still, credit where it's due, that's real action. Mike set his phone down and returned to his speech notes. Today, when he spoke to those kids about standing up for themselves with dignity, about causing change through principled action rather than rage, his words would carry the weight of fresh experience. Sometimes, he reflected, the most powerful punch you could throw wasn't with your fists at all, but with quiet determination and the unwavering belief that change was possible. One phone call had set in motion a chain of events that would impact thousands of future travelers and employees. Proof that speaking up mattered, even when you did it quietly. The community center buzzed with excitement. Hundreds of kids from across Los Angeles had gathered, many from neighborhoods where dreams often felt like luxuries. They sat in plastic chairs, their eyes fixed on the stage where Mike Tyson would soon speak. Mike stood backstage reviewing his notes one final time. The day's events had given him new perspective on what he wanted to say. He'd been working on this speech for weeks, but now, in the aftermath of the flight incident, certain parts resonated differently. A young volunteer approached him nervously. Mr. Tyson, we're ready for you whenever you are. Mike nodded, tucking his notes into his pocket. He wouldn't need them. The words were in his heart now. As he stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in applause. Camera flashes lit up the dimly lit space. These kids knew him, not just as the boxing champion, but as someone who had fought battles both inside and outside the ring. Someone who understood their struggles. Thank you, Mike said into the microphone, waiting for the noise to settle. Thank you all for coming today. He looked out at the sea of young faces, black, Latino, Asian, white, all watching him with a mixture of awe and curiosity. I was asked to talk to you about success, Mike began. About how I became a world champion. But that's not what I want to talk about today. The room fell completely silent. Today I want to talk about dignity, about how you respond when the world doesn't treat you right. Mike paced slowly across the stage, making eye contact with kids in different sections of the audience. I had something happen to me yesterday. Something small compared to the big challenges in life, but something that matters. I was on a plane, sitting in a seat I had paid for. A seat that was mine, and I was asked to move because someone else, someone with more money, someone who didn't look like me, wanted my seat. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some of the older kids nodded in recognition. Now the old Mike Tyson, he continued with a small smile. The young Mike from Brooklyn who was angry at the world. He might have caused a scene, might have refused to move, might have let his temper take over. He paused, letting that image sink in. But that's not who I am anymore. That's not who I want you to be either. Because there's a kind of strength that's more powerful than anger. A kind of power that doesn't come from your fists. For the next 45 minutes, Mike spoke from his heart about dignity in the face of disrespect, about choosing when to fight and when to step back strategically, about making change happen through thoughtful action rather than reaction. He told them about the single phone call that was already changing policy for an entire airline, about how standing up for yourself didn't always mean standing up in the moment. Sometimes it meant walking away and finding the right lever to pull. Your dignity can't be taken unless you give it away, Mike told them. Remember that, no matter who tries to make you feel small. As he concluded his speech, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Many of the kids had tears in their eyes. The center's director joined Mike on stage, shaking his hand enthusiastically. That was incredible, the director said, leaning close to be heard over the applause. You really connected with them. Mike nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. If even one of these kids remembered his words the next time someone tried to diminish them, it would be worth it. After the speech, a line formed for photos and autographs. Mike stayed for over an hour, giving each child his full attention. Some wanted to talk about boxing, but many wanted to share their own stories of times they'd felt disrespected or pushed aside. My teacher always ignores me when I raise my hand, one young boy told Mike. Like I'm invisible. Mike knelt down to meet the boy's eyes. Next time, stay calm but don't give up. After class, talk to your teacher privately. If that doesn't work, talk to your parents or another teacher you trust. Your voice matters. The boy nodded solemnly. I'll try that. As the event wound down, Mike's phone buzzed in his pocket. A news alert. He ignored it until he'd said goodbye to the last child. Then checked the screen. The headline made him pause. Sky Global Airlines announces major policy changes following incident. Mike opened the article. Sky Global had issued a press release detailing a comprehensive overhaul of their customer service policies, with specific emphasis on equal treatment regardless of status level. The release didn't mention Mike by name, but the timing made it clear what had prompted the changes. His phone rang. Frank, you've seen the news? His attorney asked. Just reading it now, Mike replied, walking toward the parking lot where his driver waited. They're not messing around, Frank said. This goes beyond what Lisa told you this morning. They're restructuring their entire VIP program. And there's more. I've received calls from 3 different journalists asking if you'd comment on rumors that a high-level executive at Sky Global has been let go. Mike stopped walking. Higher than the regional manager? Much higher. Word is it goes all the way to the VP of operations. Apparently there's evidence he was directly involved in creating a culture where certain passengers were treated as untouchable. Mike leaned against a wall, processing this information. I never asked for anyone to lose their job. You didn't have to, Frank replied. Once they started digging, they found a pattern that went beyond just your incident. This Richards guy has been causing problems for years, and management has been enabling it. The airline is in damage control mode, trying to get ahead of what could be a major scandal. Mike thought of Diane's fearful eyes on the plane. How many other employees had felt that same fear? There's something else, Frank continued. That young guy who was sitting behind you on the plane? He posted about the incident on social media. It's starting to get traction, Mike sighed. He'd hoped to handle this quietly, but the digital age made that nearly impossible. What do you want to do? Frank asked. The media is going to come to you for comment eventually. We should prepare a statement. Mike thought for a moment. Keep it simple. Say I'm pleased the airline is taking steps to ensure equal treatment for all passengers. That's it. No details about what happened, no accusations. You're letting them off easy, Frank noted. This isn't about punishment, Mike replied. It's about change. If they're making real changes, that's what matters. Back at his hotel room that evening, Mike found an email from Lisa Pearson. It included a formal apology on company letterhead, confirmation of all the policy changes they'd discussed, and an unexpected addition. Sky Global was making a substantial donation to the youth charity Mike had spoken at today. The email ended with a personal note from Lisa. Your dignified response to this situation has inspired change that was long overdue at our company. Thank you for showing us a better way forward. Mike smiled slightly. It was a start. He turned on the TV to find the story had made the evening news. A reporter stood outside Sky Global headquarters. Sources within the airline confirmed that at least 5 employees, including a senior vice president, have been dismissed following an incident involving boxing legend Mike Tyson, who was allegedly asked to give up his seat for a white passenger despite having a confirmed reservation. Mike changed the channel, not interested in seeing the story sensationalized. His phone was lighting up with messages from friends who had seen the news, but he set it aside. Tomorrow he'd deal with the media attention. Tonight he wanted to reflect on the day's events. He pulled out a small notebook, a habit he'd developed years ago during his recovery journey. In it he jotted down thoughts and lessons from each day. Tonight he wrote, "One voice speaking truth calmly can be more powerful than 1,000 shouting in anger." Change doesn't always come from fighting. Sometimes it comes from standing firm in your dignity and giving others the chance to recognize their mistakes. As he set the notebook aside, Mike thought about the young boy at the community center, the one who felt invisible when he raised his hand. That boy would be watching how this story played out. So would countless others who had ever felt pushed aside, overlooked, or disrespected because of who they were. For them, the outcome mattered. It mattered that one person refusing to be disrespected could create ripples that changed systems. It mattered that dignity, not rage, could be a powerful force for change. Mike's phone buzzed again. Another news alert. Former Sky Global executive speaks out. We've had a culture problem for years. The story was growing, taking on dimensions beyond what had happened on that plane. Something larger was unfolding, a conversation about who gets preferential treatment in America and why, about what companies allow to happen behind the scenes, about the courage it takes for employees to stand up against toxic systems, all from one incident. All from one call. Mike turned off his phone and the TV. Tomorrow would bring new developments, new requests for comments, new angles to the story. But tonight he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect wasn't a fight. It was becoming the catalyst for change that was long overdue. 3 months had passed since that flight to Los Angeles. Mike sat in his home office, surrounded by boxing memorabilia and family photos, reviewing the final draft of Sky Global Airlines' new training manual. At Lisa Pearson's request, he had agreed to consult on their staff training program, a decision that had surprised even Frank. They actually listened, Mike murmured to himself. Turning the page, the manual outlined clear procedures for handling VIP requests, with special emphasis on maintaining equal treatment for all passengers. It included real-world scenarios and decision trees for flight attendants to follow when faced with difficult situations. Most importantly, it established multiple channels for staff to report pressure from supervisors to break policy. Mike's phone rang. "Lisa Pearson, did you get a chance to review the final draft?" she asked after they exchanged greetings. "Just finishing it now," Mike replied. "It's good, practical. The section about empowering staff to make ethical decisions is especially important." "We thought so too," Lisa agreed. "Your input has been invaluable, Mike. I know this wasn't what you planned to be doing with your time this spring." Mike smiled slightly. "Sometimes the most important fights find you." "Well, I have some news I wanted to share before the press release goes out tomorrow," Lisa continued. "The board has approved the creation of a new position, Chief Ethics Officer. They've asked me to fill the role." "Congratulations," Mike said sincerely. "You deserve it. You've driven real change there." "I couldn't have done it without the push you gave us," Lisa replied. "Sometimes organizations need a wake-up call from the outside to see problems that have been there all along." After ending the call, Mike swiveled his chair to face the window, reflecting on the unexpected journey of the past few months. What had started as a simple flight and a single incident of disrespect had cascaded into industry-wide conversations about equality and customer service. The story had indeed gone viral, despite Mike's minimal public comments. The passenger seated behind him, a social media influencer with millions of followers, had shared his account of what happened. Others on the flight had corroborated it. Soon, former Sky Global employees began coming forward with similar stories about Mr. Richards and other untouchable passengers. The airline's swift and comprehensive response had turned what could have been a PR disaster into a case study in corporate accountability. Rather than denying or downplaying the incident, they had used it as a catalyst for meaningful change. Mike's phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Did you see the Wall Street Journal piece? Front page of the business section." Mike hadn't. He opened his laptop and found the article Frank had referenced. The headline read, "Beyond Damage Control, How One Airline Turned a Discrimination Incident into Transformative Change." The piece detailed Sky Global's journey over the past 3 months, the firing of the executives who had enabled the toxic culture, the complete overhaul of their VIP program, the new ethics training for all customer-facing staff. It noted that several other airlines had begun implementing similar changes, not wanting to be caught in a similar scandal. Most surprisingly, Sky Global's business had actually improved. Their honest handling of the situation had resonated with the public, especially minority travelers who had experienced similar treatment on other airlines. Their bookings were up 12% compared to the same quarter last year. Near the end of the article, there was a quote from Mike, taken from the brief statement Frank had issued on his behalf months ago. "True dignity comes not from demanding special treatment, but from ensuring equal treatment for all." Mike's assistant knocked on his office door, interrupting his reading. "Your car is here," she reminded him. "The university ceremony starts in 2 hours, but they asked if you could arrive early for the press briefing." Mike nodded, standing up and straightening his tie. Today, Westbrook University was awarding him an honorary doctorate for his philanthropic work with at-risk youth, a recognition that meant more to him than any boxing title ever had. During the drive to the university, Mike's mind wandered back to that flight. He thought about Mr. Richards, who had disappeared from public view after losing his position as CEO when his company's board deemed his behavior inconsistent with our values. The man's entitlement had finally caught up with him. He thought about Diane, the flight attendant who had tearfully apologized on the plane. He had made sure she wasn't fired, arguing that the real problem was the system that had made her fear for her job. Last month, she had sent him a handwritten note thanking him for speaking up. She was now part of Sky Global's Employee Advisory Council, helping shape their new policies. As the car approached the university campus, Mike saw a small group of protesters near the entrance. Their signs criticized the university for honoring someone with his complicated past. Mike wasn't bothered by their presence. Redemption was a journey, not a destination, and not everyone would understand or accept his growth. What mattered more were the hundreds of students and faculty members who had gathered to welcome him, many holding signs that referenced his stance against discrimination. "Dignity over disrespect," read one. "One call can change everything," read another. The university president greeted Mike warmly as he stepped out of the car. "We're honored to have you here, Dr. Tyson," she said with a smile, emphasizing his new title. "The honor is mine," Mike replied, genuinely humbled by the recognition. At the press briefing before the ceremony, a young reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Tyson, your experience on that Sky Global flight has become a case study in standing up to discrimination. Did you know when you made that call to your attorney that it would lead to such widespread change?" Mike shook his head. "I wasn't thinking about changing an industry. I was just standing up for basic respect, not just for myself, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel less worthy because of who they are. Do you have any advice for people facing similar situations who don't have your platform or resources?" another reporter asked. Mike considered the question carefully. "Document everything. Speak up calmly but firmly, and remember that sometimes the most powerful response isn't immediate. It's strategic. Know when to step back and pull the right lever at the right time." After the briefing, as Mike waited to process into the ceremony, his phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line caught his attention. "Thank you from a young fan. The email was from a teacher at the Los Angeles Community Center where he had spoken 3 months ago. Dear Mr. Tyson, I wanted to share something remarkable with you. Remember the boy who told you his teacher always ignored him when he raised his hand? Following your advice, he spoke privately with his teacher. When that didn't help, he talked to his parents and the principal. It turns out several minority students had similar experiences with this teacher. The school has now implemented new classroom participation guidelines and monitoring. The boy told me yesterday, I used my voice the way Mr. Tyson said and people finally listened. You're changing lives in ways you may never fully see. Thank you. Mike felt a lump form in his throat. Of all the consequences that had flowed from that flight incident, this one small victory for a child who had felt invisible, might be the most meaningful. As the ceremony began and Mike walked across the stage to receive his honorary doctorate, the audience rose in a standing ovation. The applause wasn't just for his achievements in the ring or even his philanthropy. It was for the example he had set, showing that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from fighting back in the moment, but from standing firm in your dignity and creating change that ripples outward. In his acceptance speech, Mike spoke about second chances and the ongoing work of redemption. He talked about how every person has the power to be a catalyst for change, even in small ways. And he shared the story of the boy from the community center, whose voice was finally being heard. That's the real victory, Mike told the audience. Not when I get respect, but when that respect extends to everyone, especially those without fame or power to demand it. After the ceremony, a group of students from the university's Black Student Union presented Mike with a framed artwork. It featured a simple image, a telephone with ripples extending outward from it like waves in water. Below, a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. 6 months after that flight to Los Angeles, as Mike sat in a different first-class cabin on a different airline, a flight attendant approached him with a smile. Mr. Tyson, she said, I just wanted to thank you. I worked for Sky Global before their big changes. The new policies you helped create have transformed the industry. We're all being trained differently now. Mike nodded in acknowledgement. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, he said simply. As the plane took off, Mike gazed out the window at the clouds below. One phone call. One stand for respect. Sometimes that's all it takes to begin bending the arc of the universe just a little more toward justice.